All right, good morning. I'd like to call the January 26, 2023 MTS Board of Directors meeting to order. May I ask the clerk to please call the roll?
Chavez. Present. McCann. Donovan. Oh, if you can please speak into your mic.
Yeah, I just wanted to let everybody know we're live online as well. That's why we have to speak into the mics.
You just gotta gently touch it, Mike.
And then remember
There you
to,
go.
there it is. Thank you. And then remember to turn it off.
Thank you.
And then remember to turn it off.
Like I say, you got to be smarter than the equipment you're with.
It took me 6 months. You did it already, so.
Present.
Fletcher here.
Here.
Leyva Gonzalez.
Leyva Gonzalez here.
Dillard. Oh, sorry, can you speak into your mic?
No, you gotta turn it on.
That's a good thing.
Here. Thank you. Mendoza. Here. Bush.
Bush here.
Frank.
Here.
Montgomery Stepp.
Here.
Elo Rivera.
Present.
Moreno. Whitburn.
Here.
Hall.
Here.
Chair, we have a quorum.
Thank you. I want to welcome all of our new board members. We are thrilled to have you all here. Pretty sizable turnover in new folks, and so we welcome you all and are excited to have you be a part of MTS. And welcome back all of our long tenured board members who are continuing with us. It's great to have everyone here in person. Our first completely in-person meeting. As Sharon mentioned, the mics, because we are broadcasting this to the public can still participate virtually. And so we want to make sure we turn our mics on anytime you want to speak and then turn them off. It's a little touchy. It's a little different than the other ones we have. It's also a good way if you want to speak on an item, either just wave at me, or if you turn your mic on, then I'll see which ones are lit up and we will go to you. With that, let's go to our first agenda item, which is public comment. And I will turn it over to the clerk to call forward our public speakers for non-agendized public communication this morning.
Thank you, Chair. We have several. Jose Puga, please make your way to the podium.
Well, good morning to everybody. I'm here. My name is Jose Puga. I am the business agent with Teamster Local 683. I represent Transdeb. We have currently 5 contracts, 3 open. One was already turned down, but I'm here today for my members, which are behind me, which are service workers that have been with Transdev. Some are tenure. And we're here to make you guys aware of the situation where I was able to obtain the drivers a $2 increase, where Transdev tried to negotiate this in the contract. And I told them that we have documents that show that these increase up to $2.50 were given all the way from October 9th, 2022 to other employees in the transit industry. Yet it took me going back and forth in negotiation with the company until the beginning of this year to be able to get that money. And there's no retro. And we're here to go even further because our service workers, maintenance and the maintenance division feel that they too deserve an increase, and they too go to the exact same classes that our drivers take to get their commercial license. Yet the Transdev does not give them the commercial license, yet they have the responsibility to drive these buses at night in a place at the Main Street facility where we're arguing with safety management about the lighting, that it's low. They said it's a budget issue, that MTS says that it's their issue, but they don't have the money for it. So we have these guys that, again, they don't have a commercial license, but they're held to that standard. And to go even further, it is prohibited for drivers to back up. Well, not for these individuals. These individuals have to back up without a spotter, any place where there's low lighting, yet they didn't receive an increase, yet they worked through the pandemic and weren't, treated as every other employee. So my understanding that this increase came from a grant from MTS. And what we want to know is this grant only for drivers, or is this grant for employees? Because we have several employees that feel otherwise. Right now, they're making $17.30 an hour when MTS drivers or bus service workers are making $20.80. I understand that there's a contract here between the client, which is MTS, and Transdev.
30 seconds left.
They have to make money, but I don't think they should save money based on safety. So these guys do the maintenance. You know, this is how these buses get out there every day after day. Yeah, you know, you can make money off the drivers, but why make money or cut corners by being understaffed and underpaying them when their job is to keep these buses in tip shape for the public? I think this is a risk that, you know, MTS is overlooking of what Transdev is doing.
Your time has expired.
Thank you.
Next is Pedro Franco. Pedro, please make your way to the podium.
Sería de que están trayendo a la gente nueva al tap pay y
Ujú.
ustedes
Okay. Okay.
Entonces,
Ah,
sí, voy a decir una oración y después yo la
Vamos,
una
okay.
oración para que nos...
Okay. Hola, mi nombre es Pedro Franco. Y soy mantenimiento en Transit. Y pues es mi primera vez que hablo, por eso estoy un poco nervioso. Pues mi nombre es Pedro Franco. Y mi reclamo es de que ellos, los que van entrando ahorita, antes había un límite al año, le subían al tope. Ahorita ya todos los que van entrando le están pagando normal. ¿Ah? Sí.
His name is Pedro Franco. He works in maintenance, and his complaint is that the people that they are bringing right now, they're making more money, and when before there was an incremental increase of a year.
No está mal que les paguen a ellos igual que a nosotros, pero la cosa es de que están haciéndolo porque se están dando cuenta que nuestro sueldo está muy bajo. Por eso lo están agarrando. A todos están pagando igual.
He is not against people making more money than him, but his problem is that because they're making less money or because they're not being paid enough, they're giving those people a raise and not them.
Ok, la otra es de que yo tengo desde hace 10 años trabajando en Transit y cuando yo entré el mínimo era $8 y cuando yo entré pagaban $12, que eran como $3 de diferencia. Y ahorita la inflación ya no está alcanzando. Ahorita ya son $2 y feria de diferencia.
He's been working in transit for 10 years, and back then the minimum wage was $8 and they were making $12. And right now the inflation it has not caught up to what they're making right now. So they're making less money than what the inflation is. And that's it.
Gracias.
Ivan Sanchez, please make your way to the podium.
Hola, buenos días. Mi nombre es Iván Sánchez, trabajo para Transdev. Mi opinión, bueno, yo no tengo mucho tiempo trabajando en esta compañía, pero pues he visto que mis compañeros trabajan bastantes horas bajo la intemperie, en la lluvia, en el frío. Muchos de ellos viven en Tijuana y pues aún así vienen a trabajar o se quedan en su carro o para descansar o van a Tijuana a ver a sus familias y pues llegan demasiado cansados.
He's been working in transit for a few years, and his complaint is that he does see people working very hard hours in harsh conditions, outdoors, under the rain. And many of them live in TJ in Tijuana, and many times they even have to stay here in their cars to sleep overnight and not see their families.
Pues creo que es justo lo que ellos están pidiendo. Y pues igual les agradezco por escucharnos y ojalá todo salga bien. Gracias.
I think it is fair what they're asking for, and I hope you can all listen to what we're asking and make justice. Thank you.
Ronald Barnes, please make your way to the podium.
Good morning, board members. My name is Ronald Barnes and I have been a member of your staff for a little over a year. During that time, I have come to gain the trust of not only my peers, but my membership staff. I stand before you today to address the following concern: service workers' pay. Members of the board, the men and women who work for this company show tremendous dedication, and I feel that we are constantly overlooked and set aside while other departments thrive. I ask this board to please increase the wages of your service workers, for in just the last 8 months, I have watched more than half of my peers leave this company for higher paying jobs. And these people were hardworking employees that the company should want to retain. I'd like to also add in that statement that in those 8 months of employee shortage, your team worked one of those months on a 30-day mandatory schedule, 6 days a week with only 1 day off to see their families. We are working harder and dedicating themselves further in order to pick up the slack during that time. Myself and my fellow peers wish to inform and remind the board today that your service workers, no matter the weather condition, rain or shine, cold or hot, we push on in dedication to our job. However, we also wish to inform the board that you have multiple people among your staff who have been with you for more than 10 years, making the same pay as everyone else who starts employment at this company. I would like to add one final thing. In the past month, we have seen a $2 increase given to another department from this company to help increase work morale and to help retain people in that department. It is in my hope that our department receives such an increase because our department needs help with recruitment and retainment. Members of the board, my peers and myself ask that you please lend a helping hand. We need y'all's help. I wish to thank you all for the following, for allowing me to be here and to be heard. Thank you.
Hector Diaz, please make your way to the podium.
Damas y caballeros, buenos días, damas y caballeros. Espero que estén pasando un excelente día. Mi nombre es Héctor Díaz. Yo tengo 15 años trabajando en Transdev. Trabajo de noche. Espero que necesitamos sin un aumento que les dieron a otras compañías, como ahí donde yo trabajo, los choferes les dieron $2 de aumento por del COVID. Okay.
Hello, my name is Hector Diaz, and you've been working for Transnet for 15 years, and he is hoping that you can consider that increase for his fellow coworkers.
Nosotros trabajamos de noche, llueve, truene o relampaguea, ahí estamos afuera con la lluvia. A los choferes donde trabajaba yo se les aumentó $2 por el COVID. Aquí a San Diego, a MTS, ya también le subieron el sueldo. Entonces, a nosotros es lo que estamos pidiendo, ese aumento para que ayudarnos pues nosotros en nuestras familias, porque yo como de mi trabajo, mi familia come de mi trabajo, entonces quisiera pues que nos ayudaran con ese aumento.
We work very hard, and he says that he works overnight, whether it's raining, sun, cold, they work in very rough conditions, and he's grateful for his job. However, he does think that it would be fair to also have the $2 increase, just like the bus operators, because he is able to provide for his family with the money that he makes every single day. So that would help him a lot.
Fíjense que este es el periódico de Latino. Les voy a leer un poquito lo que dice aquí. Desde el 1 de enero, empleadores deben pagar $15.50 en California y $16.30 en la ciudad de San Diego. Entonces, ya subió el sueldo para la comunidad y yo como les digo, nosotros trabajamos de noche. Creo que es justo ya que nos den ese aumento a nosotros, porque como les digo, yo ya tengo 15 años aquí trabajando apuros a 25, 30, 50 centavos nos aumentan y para nosotros sería muy bien, excelente si nos pudieran ayudar con esos $2 que los necesitamos.
He wanted to read something that he found in a newspaper, and it says, beginning in January 1st, employers have to pay $15.50 in California and $16.30 in the city of San Diego. And he's asking for that $2 increase because he's been working for 15 years in during the nights and in maintenance. So he really does think he deserves that because of those 15 every year, or like a 15 cent or 50 cents of increase is just not enough.
Pues gracias y muy amable por su atención y que pasen un excelente día.
He says, thank you so much for your attention and have a wonderful day.
That concludes public comment.
Thank you. Thank you to all of our speakers.
Myself have negotiations and these guys got off at 3 in the morning. So I believe that we've exchanged phone numbers and emails. If there is any, answer from the board, would be much appreciated. And 683 is always, we have a good partnership with TransDev. We just need to realign ourselves. We're evolving, or, inflation is going. So we really want you guys to bend the ear to, our workers, our backbone.
Thank you.
So again, thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. We're going to go to our first item, agenda item number 3. It's a special item. This is electing the vice chair, chair pro tem, and committee assignments for 2023 for MTS. I'm going to see if we have any public speakers in this item, but just for board members, we have a draft that the ad hoc committee came up with. This doesn't have to be set in stone. If there are some suggested changes or adjustments, we can work through those. After we see if we have any public speakers, what we'll do is to see if anyone has anything they'd like to shift around. I'll try and take count of that. And then when we get to the end, I'll encapsulate it in a motion and we can move forward. Let me first ask if we have any public speakers on item 3.
We do not, Chair.
Okay. With this, let me open up to my colleagues. You can access the draft slate on your tablet. Just clicking the hyperlink for agenda item 3 and see what the ad hoc committee came forward with. And then I'll entertain if there's any suggested changes or recommended adjustments to it. Member Bush.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So yeah, I had a couple of suggestions and changes. Starting with, I'll go ahead and start with the low sand one. I probably don't have I have a newborn, so I probably don't have the capacity for that one. That was one that I probably don't have a capacity to serve on. And then
Okay, hold on one sec. Well, on that one, and then I'll come right back to you. Is there anyone that would like to be the alternate for the Low Sand Rail Corridor Agency Board?
And I can share with you the commitment, and actually, board member Frank could probably also discuss that, but it's still virtual, but Brown Act virtual. Yes. So in other words, you would have to have a location that you could post. We'd help you post it, and you would then have to allow the public to come to that location. So it couldn't really be your home. It would have to be like the city hall or something like that.
Okay, Member Moreno. All right, we will make one change. We'll make Member Moreno the alternate on Low Sand. Okay, go ahead.
other one is Public Security Committee. I'd like to, instead of myself, nominate our alternate Councilmember Jose Rodriguez to serve on that instead of myself.
Karen, can you walk through the alternate?
Sure. For MTS internal committees, it is really up to the board's discretion. Your board policy 22 doesn't say that an alternate can't choose it. So it's really up to the board. The practical reasons in my understanding around why often our board or our committee members, our board members, is that you want that person to then be able to engage when the matter comes to the board and share that knowledge. But if on a particular appointment for an internal committee, the board decided that an alternate in that situation could still serve, and benefit the board, it's really up to you to decide if you open it up to alternates. For outside committees, they are asking for one of our primary board members, so that wouldn't.
You and Jose can agree on these issues? Because we don't want one of y'all at committee saying one thing and then we come to the board in the same seat saying, no, I disagree.
No,
I'm
so I
kidding.
spoke to Councilmember Rodriguez and I want to, and the reason I'm, nominating him too, I think it's really important for us as alternates to be really involved in the systems and the goings on. So, yeah, so I think, and I think shares our values, shares the passion for transit. I've heard him advocate for it at city council meetings. So yeah, it'll be
Awesome. Got it. Good. All right. Not seeing any other changes. I will make a motion to approve the slate for vice chair, chair pro tem, along with all of the committees for 2023 with the changes, putting member Moreno on as the alternate for the Losan committee and alternate Jose Rodriguez as the representative on public security. Is there a second? Second? Member Hall, did you have a change? Okay. All right. We have a motion and a second. Go ahead.
No, one more change. And for the executive committee, spoke to Councilmember Matthew Leyva Gonzalez, having me be the primary on the executive committee and then swapping and Matthew Leyva Gonzalez being the alternate.
That is actually set by board policy. I'm sorry. So that's up to the board to waive the board policy, but it's a rotational thing.
So we can make that change.
Yeah, it might impact in 2 years when the rotation is then set to go. Does it flip back? Generally the South Bay Caucus discusses this kind of issue and decides. But for all intents and purposes, if somebody is the primary and the other is the alternate and the primary can't come, the alternate is always alerted and then asked if they're going to come. So you could just continue with what the board policy says and then in practice do what you can.
Okay, well, I'm open.
I am as well.
Okay. So we'll leave it and then you all can work out who attends because you have a member and an alternate.
I'm sorry.
So you want to switch, Marcus, you want to switch you and Matthew? You're
Yes.
the primary and him the alternate? Okay, that's fine. And then you can
Yeah,
just work out which one of you attends.
okay, I'm okay with it.
Cool. All right. That's the third change. With those three changes, we have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Not hearing any, we're going to go to our consent calendar. Let me ask before we begin if we have any speakers on the consent agenda.
We do not, Chair.
Let me ask if we have any board members that have any comments, questions, or items that they wish pulled from consent. All right, not seeing any. Is there a motion to approve the items on consent?
I'll make the motion to approve.
Motion by member Hall, second.
Second.
Second by member McCann. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
That motion passes unanimously. We will go to our first discussion item, item 18, Fair Enforcement Diversion Program. We'll hear the staff presentation and then public speakers, and then we'll come to the board.
Good morning. For those of you who are new to the board, I'm Karen Landers, MTS's general counsel. In addition to advising the board and representing MTS on various legal questions, our department kind of partnered with the security department to put together this diversion program. So I'm going to be giving you the report on what would potentially be approval for a permanent program. So just to remind the board of how fair enforcement works at MTS, valid proof of fare is required to use all of MTS's services. And we have internally employed code compliance inspectors, CCIs, and then we have third-party contractor officers. We colloquially have always referred to them as TSS, but actually last year the new contractor was Intercon. And so those officers patrol both the platforms and the trolley vehicles and request proof of valid fare. And MTS's budget is very reliant on fare revenue being collected. So just to put into perspective, Pre-pandemic, so fiscal year 19, 1/3 of our budget was covered by fair revenue. So it's about $92 million a year that we needed to make that budget. So our policy goals, one of the things is that, the reduction in fair revenues could result in, significant budget deficit that would require service cuts or raising fares. Right now, we do have a structural budget deficit. We're fortunate enough that we were conservative in how we have spent some of the pandemic-related federal funds. And so we're able to bridge our structural budget gap until about 2027. So we have a little bit of time to try to find solutions to bring our revenues on a continuous basis back in line with what our costs are. But it is definitely a concern of how do we bridge that gap. I think it's about $37 million right now of a structural deficit. So the goals of our diversion program were to keep in place an incentive for writers to pay their fare in advance. So we didn't want to increase the number of writers who are risking it and writing without a fare because, our officers are limited. We don't have the ability to check every single person every time they ride. We're a barrier-free system. And so part of it is relying on the honor system. We also, one of the goals of the diversion program was to provide a non-criminal path for resolving that citation so that instead of it ending up in the court, there is a way that it could be taken care of beforehand and not end up in the system. And then we were wanting to try to more equitably and proportionally align the penalty for fare evasion with what the actual violation is. So the board approved a pilot in 2020, and it went into effect in September 1st of 2020. And it has since was extended for 12 months in 2021. It technically expired in at the end of August of 2022, but we have been continuing it until the board tells us either to discontinue it or to approve a permanent program. And so right now we're just maintaining the status quo while we consider what the permanent program should look like. But the current program is applicable to all fare evasion violations unless it was also coupled with something else like vandalism or assault or failure to comply, then you're not eligible for diversion. And so the options to resolve are you can immediately purchase a $2.50 one-way ticket at the vending machine or on the Pronto app if the officer finds you without a fare, or you can receive an upfront and buy. They would send $72 at the beginning of the month and just automatically have a monthly pass. Under the best fare thing, they put $72 on their card, but it's like a gift card. And so they have that balance. It's available for them to use at any time, but they don't use it unless they tap. And so as you tap and go through the system, it'll deduct $2.50 and then another $2.50. And if you tried to tap 3 times in a day, it would cap you at $6. And then as you go through the month, it would cap you at that $72. So, if you tap multiple times, it knows and is smart enough to you never be charged more than that monthly pass. But if you ride less than that, you don't get charged the full amount. You've got extra money left on your account to use the next month. And so with this, tapping at every trip 7 is required for us to actually receive the payment. So people may think I put my $72 on my Pronto account, I've paid, but they haven't actually paid until they tap, because we have an obligation to hold any untapped funds for the next month. And so that you wouldn't necessarily have to pay the full $72 the next month if you didn't use it in that month. And so this has been a pretty big learning curve, but we have spent the last 15 months of public outreach and education and adding additional infrastructure to provide more opportunities to validate. But we've really seen that increase in fare evasion, including riders that have loaded stored value on their card, but they're still risking it. They're still essentially not paying for a fare unless an officer finds them without a fare. And so that's one of the things that have a proposal of how you would modify the diversion program to address that. But just to give you a sense of some of the outreach efforts that we've done, we have a website for Pronto. Our security officers are trained and have information cards that they hand out when they do find someone who hasn't tapped, to explain to them what they're supposed to be doing. We've had various pop-up events to do training and had ambassadors at various stations to assist and educate. And then we've had station banners and validator flags and decals and pole banners wherever we can put them at stations. And then we also have digital messaging and decals on ticket vending machines to explain to people what they're supposed to be doing. And this is just some of the different media that we've passed out to try to explain that people need to tap like every single time. So then we shift to, let me describe the diversion program. I will say that participation has been very disappointing, but staff doesn't think that's a reason to discontinue the program. But we have really seen that only about 1%, 1.5% of the people that get a citation actually participate in diversion. Another 2.4% are either maybe voided for administrative reason. There was something wrong with that process, but 96% of them are getting sent to court for the citations. But one thing that we found to then, like as we've developed, we finally starting in May of 2022 had more data coming in through our Pronto inspection application to understand what's happening in the field and is there really a connection between this stored value tapping and fare evasion. And what it's told us is yes, there has been. In the Pronto inspection app for when officers go and approach someone to read their card, 71% of people have a valid fare on their card. And 42% of the total riders are using stored value. They are using that best fare technology. Another 27% have no valid fare, but about 6% of that is not a concern for us. That is a situation where they might actually have bought up front a pass product, but they just didn't tap. And so we've been paid in that situation. We now have the ability to know and understand that and not issue a citation for that. But 21, just under 22% have no valid fare. And that either means they have no money and no pass on their card at all, or they have stored value, but they didn't tap. And so that, really tells us that about, 21% at least, we've got other metrics that were telling us it was closer to 40%. But this one was the most comprehensive that we felt was a real number. 21% of people are kind of risking it to say, I'm not going to tap unless I need to. And that compares to our fare evasion rate that was documented from 2012 to 2019 was an average of 2.92%, so just under 3%. So that's a significant difference between before the program and after the program. And then we dived deeper into some of the data, and we have another app that then we deployed that, again, with this option to buy a one-way ticket. So instead of getting a citation, go buy your fare right now. It used to be that you could only do that by going to the ticket vending machine and purchasing a one-way ticket. And now, since people have stored value, we have the ability of the officer has an app that they can open and tap the person's card and validate it and deduct that $2.50. And so when we looked at the data of the officers trying to do that while they're on the system to deduct the fare, 85% of those attempts for on-the-spot payment were successful, meaning in 85% of the time, their person had enough money on their account to deduct the $2.50. So only 15% of the time did the person not have at least $2.50 on their card. So it really shows us that 85% of those violations, at least, like it truly is risking it. You have the money on your card. You could have paid when you started your trip, but you're just waiting to see if somebody catches you before you pay. So in general, as we've looked back at this, program, we do feel that the program, if people participate, provides a non-criminal path that is less onerous than the court path. And so we don't think that low participation should be a basis to discontinue the program. We want that to be an option. We want to encourage people to do it. But we do believe that the option to immediately purchase a $2.50 one-way fare, if you're being caught, after you're caught without one, really substantially undermines our whole Pronto fare system, education and conversion efforts, and it eliminates that incentive to purchase a fare and tap before a ride. So it seems like this option, where the worst thing that can happen to you if you're caught without a fare is that you have to buy a one-way fare, has really kind of led to an increase in fare evasion, and it is having a financial impact on MTS. And so we wanted to see if there was a way that we could potentially modify the program and make it permanent, but that realigns it and removes that incentive to not buy a fare or tap before. So what staff came up with was a proposal. We would still keep it eligible for all fare evasion violations. It's not like only on your first offense. We don't actually have the ability in the field right now to know, is it a first offense or a second offense? And so you could have 10 offenses and you could participate in the diversion every time. But we do not believe that for people that you should be allowed to do diversion if it's associated with a vandalism or assault or another incident. But we were looking at it, how could we align it? And so what we're proposing is that we would reduce our already reduced fine from $25 to $15. And then we would make the right to immediately buy a fare that you can immediately participate in the diversion program and buy a $15 penalty fare, so that like amount that you pay is the same. It's all the diversion program. So you either can pay it immediately on board through your Pronto account or at a ticket vending machine, or you can, if you don't have the money right there that day, you can have 4 months to come up with money and pay that fine. And so that was one proposal. Then we also felt that since the $15 fine, that potentially we would then reduce the community service hours from 3 hours to 1 hour, because that aligns with kind of minimum wage. So to the extent that the value of somebody's time should be worth the same. So if whether it's $15 or it's an hour of your time, under current minimum wage, we felt that that might be a more equitable distribution of those options. We wouldn't change the option to appeal in 15 days, and we wouldn't change the 120-day time frame to comply. And so again, when we looked at that, creating this new kind of penalty fare of the $15, we felt that it, number one, aligned with the reduced fine in the diversion program. It removes this incentive to risk it, because instead of it only costing $2.50, which is what you would have had to spend to just comply with the rules from the first part, hopefully the $15 is more of an incentive to say, once you get caught and have to pay that $15 once, maybe it's not worth risking it in the future and you'll actually tap and pay. But it also, we felt, addressed an equity issue, because it didn't necessarily seem fair that someone who had the funds and could do it right away only had to pay $2.50. But if you didn't have the money at the moment you were caught, on your card, then your only option was to pay $25 by going through the diversion program. And so we felt by making whether you pay on the spot or whether you pay like over the 4 months of the diversion program, making that amount the same seemed more equitable than allowing people that have ready access to funds to pay a significantly reduced amount. So with that, we're open to discussion. I know that the Public Security Committee has had lots of discussion back and forth on this. So we're open to feedback, questions. We set this up as a action item if the board wanted to just go ahead and approve the diversion program as recommended, or as you resolve this discussion, or you can give us other direction.
So if I could just, we've been doing excessive efforts to communicate that you have to tap. And we've been talking to our customers a lot about this. We've been putting out signage. We have people stationed at stations saying, please tap, and they're not tapping. We've been doing a big effort on this, but yet we're still seeing our evasion increasing, and it's people who are risking it. We can talk about people who don't have enough money to pay for the fares. That's one, policy idea that we could discuss. But what we're trying to do is to get people who currently shouldn't I just risk it because I really don't have any penalty in order to do that. So we're just seeing more of that behavior because we have this ability to step off and pay your fare. Or even now we have a validation app that the security team has that can deduct the $250 right there on board. So people just feel like I can do this. So that's why we're bringing this to you today. And certainly we can always revisit it later to see if there's an issue with it. But we were hoping to stem the tide a little bit on our revenue loss.
Thank you, Sharon. For new board members, we've spent a lot of time, and I want to thank Member Montgomery, Steph, and the Public Safety Security Committee have been working on this for a while. The origination of this was if you got a penalty for not having fare, when you added all the court fees and everything else, it was almost $200. And so you had individuals who had a $2.50 fare evasion who ended up getting a penalty of almost $200, which didn't seem right or just. And that was the diversion program and kind of all of the things that have been taken. The issue before us, and I think the diversion program folks want to continue. I'm a little concerned by the really low participation, and maybe there's some work we can do to make sure folks know that is an option. But I think the issue that we've got to resolve this kind of year is, again, we've got that $37 million structural budget deficit, and about a quarter of that, based on this, can be ascribed to fare evasion, individuals who do it, and I think that's trying to find the balance of folks who don't have the ability to pay versus folks who have the ability to pay and have been paying for years and years and years. But if you don't tap and you get caught, then you just tap and pay the $250. And so trying to figure out how we do this in a responsible way. Understanding too, Pronto's still new. Pronto's still a new system that we're doing. So let's go to public speakers and then we'll come back to the board. I'll start with Member Montgomery, Steph, who has kind of led the way on this as chair of the Public Security Committee, and then we'll hear from everyone else and see what the board's direction is.
Sally Small, please unmute yourself now.
Thank you. Excuse me. I've been a writer of MTS since 1973. Haven't been able to drive since 2004. So I do ride regularly pre-COVID and now not as much. But my neighborhood in Emerald Hills only has one bus, 916, 917, to get to the Orange Trolley. And since it only runs once an hour, I will invariably cut it really close. I do try to tap. A lot of times it doesn't work. And so I feel a little guilty when I get on, but if I'm in a rush, I'm going to go if I've got a deadline to meet. As for the price we should pay. I agree, 250, if you have money on your card, should be charged automatically. If not, make it be a full day pass value, and that would be their disincentive to skip by if they're actually skipping. I think a lot of times people are just in a rush, and especially if they have a full month's pass, they think they're still good. And for those of us who ride infrequently, that's also another thing. I think the diversion program should continue, but I realize that there are too many people evading it. I think they have money on their card and should not be penalized beyond one day's fare unless they don't pay up at the time. Thanks.
Karina Contreras, please unmute yourself now.
Yes, thank you. My name is Karina Contreras. I am the Transportation Policy Advocate for Climate Action Campaign. And, I actually want to wholeheartedly agree with the previous speaker. As someone who utilizes both NCTD and MTS transit, most of the time people are in a rush. And it seems to me like if there's the ability to recapture that fare utilizing the technology for fare collection on the go, it seems like there might be a staffing issue. So would it be better to have more individuals that can check fares? Because it seems like a lot of people are just not tapping. And, I know it's difficult because you need money to be able to function as a transit agency. So I'm wondering if it would be better to allocate funding towards more staffing to ensure that the fares are collected appropriately. So just curious about that. Thank you.
Chair, that concludes public comment.
Thank you. We'll go to Member Montgomery Stepp.
Thank you so much, Chair Fletcher. Let me start by thanking Ms. Cooney and Ms. Landers for this years-long effort of trying to establish this program. And I will say that it has not been a burden. I believe that you all have really come to the table wanting to do this. So I really do appreciate all of the work that you have put into this. Just for additional context, when we were exploring different ways to approach this, we looked at having a completely civil procedure as opposed to involving any kind of criminal getting into the criminal system at all. And that was for different reasons. That was when we talk about equity, if we have a violation that has to do with our car, we don't necessarily go through the criminal system, right? So we were looking at that, drivers as opposed to our folks that have to ride our line. We were looking at the fact that at that time, a PRA that was done by one of our media companies said that 86% of people who get these tickets don't pay them at all. So we were looking at, how much we were putting into that system and then how much we were getting out of it. And also at that time, our community action plan on homelessness at the city of San Diego had come out, and a lot of the interviews, anecdotal evidence, but still interviews show that people who had tickets through the MTS system, it was later on in their lives prohibiting them from getting back on their feet. And so we wanted to do something, at least offer an alternative for people so that they would not be caught in that system. And two things about the participation. One is, the fact that we have admin errors is, more than the participation is, I think, something that we should also look at as an agency, which is why I'm going to, talk about my concerns about the $15 penalty. But also, it's not 1.5% is not a lot, but 169 people is quite a bit, just because that could have changed the trajectory of their lives. And so when we're dealing with these issues, I try to look at it that way as well. So that, for additional context, I know we have a lot of new awesome energy here at the board. So just wanted to provide that additional context for why we are here now. I will say that I am also in agreement and have been in agreement since I saw this posted with the callers that we just heard about. Also, me having had issues going from City Hall just over to Petco with the tapping system. I think that we need a little bit more time to get that super clean analysis, Karen, that you talked about, before we begin to put our enforcement officers in a position where they are approaching people and saying, no, we need $15 instead of $250. And folks are like, well, I tapped, or something happened. I think that it will add another element to the line that we're not necessarily prepared for. I don't want to dismiss it fully. I do want to continue to look at the system. I don't think Pronto is where it is for us to be able to make that type of evaluation. I also have continued to talk about fare box recovery and our efficiency in our system that is top of the nation, right? But also that as we move out and do some of the things that this board has previously talked about, that we are looking at that reforming the Transportation Development Act and being a part of those conversations. I've continually mentioned that in this space. And so I think that when we're looking at issues like this, we have to explore our other options as we continue to open up our system. So I am concerned about that approach. I think it's somewhat reactive at this time because I still don't think that we have enough, that Pronto's where it needs to be yet for us to begin to make this a part of the diversion program. And this is a board, so I'm sure that folks have a lot of different opinions, which I'm definitely open for. But at this time, I don't think that we should move forward with that penalty. I think that I would be open to coming back and looking at evaluating the Pronto system overall, looking at some of the issues that we're having, comparing that to the data that you've already collected, and then making a decision in 6 to 9 months about that. But I'm not comfortable with doing it now. We've gone from having some of our highest numbers in ridership to the pandemic, to implementing this new system, and now kind of using people as sort of what I think would be a scapegoat for some of the issues that Pronto is having. So I want to continue to evaluate. And at this time, I would make a motion to approve the fare enforcement diversion program with the exception that the on-the-spot fare purchase remain at $250, or that the required fare cost of the rider's desired trip destination, and for staff to evaluate outstanding fare evasion and return to the board at a later date if necessary changes need to be made. I'll leave my motion at that. Thank you so much.
I'm happy to second your motion. Look, we're continuing to evaluate everything that we're doing. And I think, you raise a good point. I think we all acknowledge we have an issue we have to address as it comes to fare box recovery and folks who have the ability to pay. And some of that is a part of this, and some of these folks are not a part of that. And so I think if we did that, I would just ask if it's okay, I'm happy to second that. Maybe we can just set a date, have them come back in 6 months. And continue to evaluate, continue to engage what we're doing in Pronto, and then understand as a board, we're going to have to at some point address this. But we can give Pronto 6 more months. We can continue the outreach engagement, look at what other things we may need to do to make tapping easier. Just with all of us knowing this kind of delta is something we are gonna have to address and come back. But I'm
That's
happy to
fine
second
with
that
me.
motion.
6 months.
Okay.
Can I just make sure that I understand the motion? Is it to keep the program that is in place right now?
Continue the pilot.
So the one that's on the screen, not a modification of the recommended
You
one.
wanted to continue the pilot program for 6 more months, just the way it is today.
What is the implication of going permanent with the way that it is today? As far as just from a pure operational standpoint?
There would be no change. I just wanted to make sure that your motion wasn't proposing you wanted to take some of the staff recommendation, but not all of it, that it like keep the program as is now and then come back and
Yeah, come back. Yes.
We go to Member Hall.
Well, and I was gonna suggest maybe a phased in approach too at that point. I know that when I've tried to use the tapping stations, sometimes you can't even find them. And that's been my problem. I remember over at the railway station. I'm looking all over for the thing and I couldn't find it anywhere. And it's just this little thing sticking out of the ground. And I think that's something that we probably, and maybe it's just me, you know, I mean, again, but I'm thinking of tourists coming in and people like that, that use it maybe once, in their lifetime, maybe if they're tourists. And, whereas when I was in New York, you know, you didn't get in unless you had unless you were tapping something. So I think that's something we ought to look into, is just making maybe more of those, if nothing more, or just making it more accessible and people could see them. Because you have, that's it, but I would also consider maybe looking at a phased in approach where maybe this year it's 250. And we can do that as we go, maybe go up to 5 and then 750, 10, so on and so forth.
So we are working on getting the ticket vending machines to be a validator. And those are obvious, much more obvious. And then we put flags on top of the validators so people can see them. You know, and then we're going to add some at other stations. So we understand that that's something we need to work towards. We do have one public comment.
Okay, well, no more. No, and this is, I mean, look, this is a challenge because we don't have a closed system like other places, right? There's not a gate that you got to tap to enter, or, you know, we have open systems. And so I think continuing to work. One thing too, one suggestion I might make too is to see what it would take on the enforcement side to know, is this the 17th time someone's been caught not tapping, or is it the first time someone's been caught not tapping? Because that might help differentiate, you know, your kind of habitual offenders. I don't know if that's possible. So let me ask, we have any other comments? Member Chavez?
Thank you so much for working so hard on this. I can attest to it. I got all my friends for Padres game to purchase Pronto cards, and they hated me a little bit, but you know, it's so true what our other board member was saying, that it's so hard to find sometimes. And you know, I applaud that sometimes it's bilingual. You have put a lot of effort and thought into this, and thank you for thinking about the financial hardship as well. That is a real thing, at least what I've seen in the Blue Line. A lot of people, a lot of young people as well, that don't even know sometimes, you know, when there's promotions, we do a really good job promoting all these promotions when it's free ridership. I think we can do a little better in general, being bilingual, also, you know, having these stations where you tap. I've gone with them. Sometimes they hate me because they get out of the game at Petco Park and there's no ride back, right? Or they stay a little bit in downtown, that's a whole other issue. That's a whole other issue that we need to address. But thank you so much, Member Montgomery staff, for working so hard on this and thinking about the financial hardship on people.
Member Bush?
My button. No, there we go. Well, yeah, really want to thank staff for their hard work on this. And we as a board, we definitely have to be mindful of our resources and our revenue coming in, and fair evasion is a part of that. And I appreciate staff prioritizing this, right? I do support the work that Member Montgomery Step and the committee have done on this. I still have a lot to learn. I have some questions for staff. And so there's a lot of folks not tapping. And so I think I still would like to hear more of the why, and if we have that data. So how much of it, it looked like there's some good data here that 85% of the folks that aren't tapping are actually have the money to do it. They have the amount on the card, but how many of them is it because they're to Member Hall's point, how much of it is because they're rushing and they're just forgetting, or they don't access it, versus how many are actually trying to game the system? I don't know if we have data on that, the why.
We don't have data. I mean, the few people that have participated in the diversion program, we have a survey we ask them to fill out that kind of asks like, why didn't you? And the significant majority of them check risking it. You know, like some of them, you know, there's other reasons, if I didn't have enough money, this and that, but the majority of those responses that we get from that survey is that they were risking it.
So
but we don't know on the Pronto Validator app. Like we don't ask that question. That's just a officer going through, and if you don't have it, then they switch over.
I'd be interested in, I don't know if that's something that our security officers, or even part of maybe this is surveyed through the Pronto asking that question. I think that would be interesting to know. I know for us as board members, we do get these passes. I don't even know, are we supposed to tap when we have these passes? And so I wonder if folks that might have monthly or annual passes that are just, they've already paid their money and they're not worried about it, so they're not tapping, is that also factored into this?
Let me go to.
Do you get
the-
me? My question is, so those that already
Yes.
paid annual, already paid a year, even for us as board members, if that data is being counted as to kind of evading, then I don't really see it as such.
No.
Okay,
So that's the difference between that 27% and the 21%.
got it. Okay.
So that 6% is that the system is telling us this person didn't tap, but they have a past product, so we've already been paid. So we don't consider that in those statistics. We're just looking at the people that are only paying with stored value, and they either have no money, no pass on their card, or they have stored value, but they didn't tap before that ride.
Okay. Then the final question. So what is the percent that we think, I guess, based on the survey, if it's on here, the staff report, what was the percent of those who are doing it intentionally, evading the fare with the, based on the data that we have?
We don't know who's doing it intentionally. I mean, I would.
Or I guess a guess, right? It'd be
yeah,
survey or something.
This is statistics in the different app where it allows the officer to actually validate. So the numbers in this app are different than the numbers in this one. So actually in the validation app, 40%, actually 65% of the people that the officer contacts don't have a fare, but that also might be because in the inspection app, they came across that person, they didn't have a valid fare, so they switched over to the validation app to validate it. But every time then they switched over to the validation app to like, all right, I'm going to take your $2.50. 85% of the time they try to do that, there's money on the card. So, but we don't know it is the reason they didn't tap in the first place because it was a calculated risk that they take every single time and they never tap unless they're forced to, or was it a one-off because they were rushing and couldn't find a validator? We don't know that difference.
Okay, that's one thing that I would suggest to staff look at before they go back to the Public Security Committee. And I know that's going to be hard. That might have some subjectivity in the data that you're collecting when it comes to that. But I think as much as possible, if we can get to the why, is it because, folks are having trouble, finding it and they're in a rush? Even is there, do we have those tap machines? I can't even remember seeing it even this morning. Do we have all of these tap validators inside the vehicles themselves? Do we?
No.
Do we have any? And so,
No.
and maybe it's, I know that's an added cost in the infrastructure, but maybe it's, putting them inside of some of the vehicles. So I would like us to kind of look at those options, but before we go to increasing that fee from the 250 to the 15. But for me, I'm open to it. I just would like to see more of the data and figuring out what is that number. And the caller earlier that suggested, the day pass. I mean, I thought that was an interesting suggestion, but
I do want to caution us not to assume that a very large percentage of people don't know that they have to tap, or a very large percentage of people don't see the validators. For probably 6 months, we had a security officer down here right next to the validators. And as people walked by, he said, you must tap before you board the next train. And maybe 2 out of 20 people walking by complied. And I'm not saying I only observed this once, because it became a morning ritual for me to stand there and watch this happening. And, maybe you say that doesn't matter because they get a free transfer and they think that through as they're walking by. Instead of tapping their card, they just keep walking. But I mean, anyway, I just don't want to
appreciate that.
conflate the idea that it's all because, yes, we have some stations that have a very small platform area and we only have the one validator on the ends of the platform. We recognize those issues, but at these large stations where we actually have personnel telling them, please tap, we don't get compliance.
I appreciate that. Yeah. And that's, and I under no illusion that 100% of the people are doing the right thing. There's absolutely going to be people that game the system, but how do we, it sounds like what we don't know is the why or the how much of that, a kind of an estimate. That's what I'd like staff to work on to know. And then what should that amount, if that would help, what should that amount be? And what's an amount that's equitable and fair?
Yeah, I mean, that's what we're trying to resolve. I remember parking once at a Padre game in a lot and it was $45 to pay for the lot, but the ticket in the lot was only $35. So why would you pay? You wait and see if you get caught, right? In fact, there was an incentive that way. And I think that's what we're trying to do. Now, look, we've got some time, right? It's our issue's not going away. And I think this is all good feedback. Let's go to Member Moreno.
Thank you. And I want to start off by saying that it's really nice to be here in person and see everybody. And I want to thank Karen and your whole team. I would have to say that I think regardless of what this board throws at you and your team, you guys are always willing to step up to the plate and to do the work. So I appreciate all the work that has been done on this particular item, and also obviously to the chair of the Public Safety Committee. Thank you so much for your work. This was a enormous task when we first came on to this committee, so or to this board, I should say, right? So one of the most striking findings in this report is that there's a gap of 26% between the ridership on our system and the fare revenue we collect. The report suggests that the fare diversion pilot program is a major cause of this gap. I personally think that that's very unlikely. The staff reports also, it also notes that only 1.5% of fare violation recipients have utilized the diversion pilot program. This is a tiny number of actual passengers. And so the claim that this tiny program has caused this huge 26% gap between ridership and revenue is doubtful, to say the least. So therefore, I would actually like to focus on comments that could possibly be the cause of what might be going on. I suspect this is primarily a problem facing the trolley system rather than the bus system, but I don't know for sure. What is the gap between revenue and ridership for the bus system versus the trolley system? And does staff have those numbers?
I'm looking for Larry or Mike. One of them might have it, but buses, we have compliance because we have the driver there. So
Which, once again, I think that the bus system obviously probably performs better. And that's just by the design of our buses, right? Every passenger has to tap before the actual bus leaves. And the driver actually offers some form of enforcement. Yeah. And this leads me to two potential causes of fare evasion. I do believe that limitation on tapping infrastructure on the trolley, such as the number and placement of the validators, is one of the causes, and also inadequate fare inspection. I've heard from constituents that have just sometimes forgotten to tap, mostly, especially when people are rushing to board the trolley when it's about to leave. I think if we see the trolley at the station, you might just run to the trolley to get on, and either not bother to find the validator, or you can't find the validator. Either you risk getting the trolley or you risk not tapping, right? Or you risk losing your trolley, basically. And as was mentioned, the validators are not located on the trolleys, and they're not located in the front of every possible door. At many stations, there are only 2 validators at either end of the platform. And contrast this with the passenger experience on the bus, where everybody must board from the front door and pass the validator before boarding. The bus will actually not leave before a passenger has had a chance to tap. So has staff explored adding additional validators on platforms and inside of trolley cars, and improving the signage at stations and on trolleys to encourage tapping? And in general, can you please speak more about the efforts mentioned on page 5 of the staff report, just to provide more ways for passengers to tap and validate their fares?
So I think, I don't know if the staff of I know that we have various capital projects, Sharon may know them more than I do, of what's in place to increase the tapping infrastructure? Because we've done several, you know, one of the things was, you know,
Yeah, it's that we're retrofitting the ticket vending machines so that that can become a validator. It's a much larger box because people can see it. You also are storing money on your card at that point when you're in front of the ticket vending machine, so you can validate at that point and deduct the amount. And then we're also adding more validators on platforms where we feel like that there's not enough. And then we've put up flags. You can see them. They're these tall purple flags that indicate, here's your validator. You should do this. We also have signs that show that you need to tap in order to ride on all of our trolley cards. You know, signage everywhere.
Okay, well, thank you for that response. Also, the presence and activity of security officers conducting fare inspection is another consequential factor. What percentage of trolley riders have fare inspections and what percentage should have them? For instance, how does this percentage compare to the other barrier-free transit systems?
so
I don't think Karen can answer that question. I don't know. It's in our security reports that we send to the board each week. Does anybody have one of those where they could give us the numbers? 7%.
Last week, there were 45,000 fare checks and that was 7% of the 687,000 riders.
Okay.
So 7% were fare checked last week.
Thank you. We'll get you on the payroll.
Thank you, Councilmember Goebel. Thank you for that. I support making this pilot program permanent, so I will absolutely support the motion on the floor. I do not think the diversion program is the main cause of the gap between ridership and fare revenue. Instead, I think this gap is caused by inadequate tapping infrastructure and insufficient fare inspection on the trolley. I would personally like to see staff come back to the board with a plan to address those issues. But with that, that concludes my comments, Chair.
Thank you.
And I will be supporting the motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Member Goebel.
Thank you, Chair. The staff report said pre-pandemic, we had 34 to 40% fare box recovery. And last year was 18.2%. And that we would need to come up with 48 million to close that gap somewhere. We've kind of backed into a sense of what free transit would cost. It's very costly without a new revenue source. I have that 7% figure handy because I think if we have more fare checkers, that will cost less than the 8 to 10 million we're losing in fares. And the benefit of additional fare checkers, I think that's a fairness issue to all riders, that everyone be checked, but it also, a visible extra fare checker has the benefit of added security on the trolley for all riders. When you see a uniformed person going person to person to person, that provides a sense of, wow, this is now a much more secure place to ride because there's a presence of somebody here to provide safety for all riders. So I would think about adding more fare checkers, especially since we're only checking 7% of the riders. I think we're on the right track. I think we'll get there. A couple of tweaks along the way.
Thank you. Member Mendoza.
I just want to, I'm a senior and I travel on the trolley system often with my husband, who is a disabled senior. And so I just want to make sure that we take, so I don't pay a fare, right? But he does. And so I often have to wait for him to, I'm trying to get him to get the Pronto card, but I haven't been able to talk him into it yet. So sometimes, it's really cumbersome for him to get a ticket. And so I just want to take our disabled and senior riders into consideration when we're thinking about this, because a lot of times, we're trying to get to the Padre game or now the Snapdragon. And then also when you get there, our station isn't that busy and we know exactly where the ticket machine is and where the Pronto machine is. But when you're leaving the venue that you went to, the state, like I've seen like 35 people in line all at the same time trying to get a ticket or trying to tap. So, and sometimes the security guards will just tell you, just get on. Maybe I shouldn't have disclosed that. But, you know, because there's so many people waiting in line to get on, and the trolleys are so packed that they've just told people after a game, you know, just go ahead and get on. So anyway, that's been my personal observation as a senior myself, is we need to take senior and disabled riders into consideration if we continue with a penalty, you know, in 6 months, continue with the penalty suggestion.
I know we're adding more at Snapdragon, but we might look at some mobile tapping infrastructure that could kind of accommodate special events. When there's a huge surge, we could deploy more, you know, but they don't necessarily need to be there all the time. You have Comic-Con, you have Snapdragon, you know, you have whatever, maybe there's something, you know, when you have those huge, because we've seen the videos of those huge crowds surging on as a testament to the success of our special events, but you can understand how that could be challenging for everyone to go tap. Member Elo Rivera, and we'll come back to Member Gold.
Thank you, Chair. I really appreciated the conversation here. I just want to, we've heard multiple members now mention personal experiences with having challenges in tapping. The last time I rode with my wife was the same thing. I want to make sure we don't lose that part of this. And so to the extent possible, when we revisit this, if we can also perhaps include in that conversation ideas or plans to make it easier for folks to pay when they want to pay. I doubt anyone who mentioned their troubles here had any intention of wanting to avoid fares and reduce our fare box recovery rate. Yet we all struggle to do so. And so this seems like an important part of the conversation, and they obviously go hand in hand. So if at 6 months, when we come back to revisit the pilot, if we can also discuss any plans you all have to make it easier, whether it's the mobile option that you just discussed. I just want to make sure that that's like kind of included here if possible, because it seems like a really important piece of this conversation.
Yeah, either February or March, we're bringing back an item on Pronto, so we can certainly include that.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Sharon.
Okay, Member Goebel.
One quick comment on the messaging on the signage on these things. The headline is every ride, every time. Just make a tap here. I go to a station. I just want to know, where do I tap? I don't want to have to read headlines and sub-headlines. Just maybe we're overthinking the marketing side of this thing and just tap here.
There you go. Makes sense. Point well taken. Okay. We'll go back to Member Chavez and then we're going to vote and move on.
Just a quick question, forgive my ignorance. How about a scan code? It's so popular nowadays. Maybe a scan code, you put your number in and that's it. I'll talk to the IT people and the technical people to see if that's feasible. Yeah.
Okay. All right. We've got a motion and a second to continue the existing program as is for 6 months. Continue evaluation, the engagement, efforts around making Pronto work better, and then we will come back as a board to do that. We have motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? That carries unanimously. We're gonna, before we go to item 19, 19 and 20 are informational items, important ones, one on our for hire and then the next one on our budget status. But I want to ask all board members, hang with us. We want to get a group picture of the board at the conclusion of the meeting. So please don't slip out. And I will turn over staff for presentation on item 19, but no formal vote from us.
Good morning, board members and members of the public. My name is Leonardo Fiwell, and I am the For Hire Vehicle Administration Manager for MTS. Today, I will provide a presentation on For Hire Vehicle Administration's operations, staffing, funding, and overall function to provide for hire vehicle. regulation. For hire vehicle administration is a department within MTS conducting for hire vehicle regulation. Types of vehicles that we regulate include taxi cabs, non-emergency medical, charter, jitneys, and low-speed vehicles. For hire vehicle administration is staffed by a 6-person team. One manager who's responsible for the oversight of the department, one regulatory analyst responsible for permitting functions, including the acceptance and processing of permit applications, 3 regulatory inspectors responsible for field enforcement. Our inspectors are public officers under Penal Code 836.5. And what this means is that they are authorized to issue citations to those drivers if they're caught in a violation. And also one administrative assistant. For hire vehicle administration staff, and certain vehicle inspections are located at the MTS Imperial Avenue Division Bus Maintenance Facility, just 2 blocks east of this building. For the status of the MOUs with the cities in the County of San Diego, MTS is currently under agreement with 9 cities to perform for hire vehicle regulation in their particular jurisdictions. These cities include Chula Vista, El Cajon, Imperial Beach, La Mesa, Lemon Grove, National City, Poway, San Diego, and Santee. Effective last year, MTS enabling legislation was changed to allow MTS to enter into MOUs with any jurisdiction within the entire county, not just the cities that I just mentioned within MTS service area. We are currently conducting efforts to discuss the interests of those cities outside of MTS service area to contract with MTS for vehicle regulation. There are no direct costs to those cities, to the current cities or potential cities for entering into an MOU with MTS. All costs for vehicle regulation are paid by permit holder fees. For hire vehicle administration responsibilities include primary goals of ensuring public safety. And for that, we conduct criminal background checks on applicants and permit holders to ensure that they have no pending issues with the criminal justice system. We also require annual vehicle safety inspections to be performed at least annually to ensure that those vehicles are safe to be operated on the streets. We also require commercial vehicle liability insurance to be maintained at full force at all times. That way, if an accident happens, members of the public can receive proper insurance coverage. We require the vehicles to be maintained and operated safely at all times. And we also host driver safety training classes to let our drivers know of the high expectations and that the public has for them, and also on our ordinance requirements. And our field inspectors conduct regular field monitoring for those vehicles and driver permits on the field. Another goal is to prevent unfair consumer practices. Taxi cabs could not charge any more than the meter or maximum rate as applicable. And drivers of taxi cabs must also provide trip receipts upon request to the passengers. And we also investigate passenger complaints. Any passenger can contact us directly via phone or via our website, or also by scanning our QR code sticker that can be found in any of our taxi cabs at the back part of the vehicle. The County of San Diego also plays a regulatory responsibility. We partner with them as for hire vehicle administration, the sheriffs, our partners in the regulation of MTS. We regulate the vehicles, the permits of the vehicles, and the sheriffs. They're responsible for issuing the drivers of the vehicles with the proper ID cards. And for that, the sheriffs are responsible for processing those applications for those drivers who wish to drive any of the MTS permitted vehicles. Those drivers are required to go through a driver and alcohol drug testing, also a subsequent criminal background check. And the sheriff also monitors for subsequent arrests or contacts with law enforcement. And that way, the public safety is assured That way the sheriffs can take action in the event that they find that the driver is not suitable to be driving. And it is estimated that 1,400 drivers are currently licensed by the sheriff, and that includes taxi drivers, non-emergency medical drivers, and charters, which all require to have a sheriff ID in order to operate our permitted vehicles. Our budget by statute has to be 100% cost recovery. Our main funding source is the regulatory fee, which is an annual fee that is paid by each of our vehicles, by the permit holders for each one of our vehicles. It is determined every year based on the number of permits. In practice, the more permits that are within our purview, the lower the regulatory fee. For this year, taxi cabs, low speeds, and jitneys, the regulatory fee for those vehicles is $350 per vehicle. And for non-emergency medical and charter vehicles, the regulatory fee is $440. I will cover a little bit on the description of each of the vehicles that we regulate. First and foremost, the main type of vehicle that we regulate are taxi cabs. And taxi cabs that are the main difference between a taxi cab and an Uber. I get that question all the time. Is a taximeter compensation is determined by the taxi cabs compensation is determined by a taximeter. Taximeter is a device that calculates compensation by time, distance, or a combination of both. For hire vehicle administration calculates maximum rates of fare every year based on a consumer price index formula. Calculations are usually made at the beginning of the year. Taxi cabs are able to take street hails or prearranged trips. All of our MTS regulated taxis can pick up in all of the 9 cities that I just mentioned that for hire vehicle administration has an MOU with. Also, our taxi cabs can make limited prearranged pickups in the rest of San Diego County. Very important to mention that all of our taxi cabs must meet California Air Resources Board criteria for 0 or low emissions. Taxi cabs are important because they provide an alternative and they're available for those persons who are unbanked or those without a smartphone. They also, unlike TNCs, they are set by a maximum rate of fare that's set by MTS. Therefore, they do not utilize a surge pricing method, which is pretty unpredictable. There are, however, some concerns for taxi cabs, mainly the high operating costs. One of the highest operating costs for taxi cabs are the high insurance premiums required to maintain that commercial liability insurance. There is also increased competition from transportation network companies such as Uber and Lyft. TNCs, Uber and Lyft are regulated on the state level by the California Public Utilities Commission. Taxis are seen not on a level playing field with TNCs in terms of regulations. However, we believe there may be future openings for taxis in the market due to growing concerns from TNC drivers having to do with this increased subscription fees, low base rate for drivers, and increasing gas costs. Taxi cabs are also a mode that provides wheelchair accessible vehicles. Wheelchair accessible vehicles are equipped with side entry wheelchair accessible ramps. These are important because they provide additional transportation options for individuals with disabilities or limited mobility. There are some concerns on the limited number of taxi cabs that we currently permit. However, we are researching strategies to increase that number. NEM standing for non-emergency medical and charters. Unlike taxi cabs, the compensation for these type of vehicles are they're based on a per capita or per mile basis. They provide transportation to patients to hospitals, clinic, or other non-emergency medical appointments. An NEM vehicle is a wheelchair accessible vehicle. Charters do not have wheelchair accessible equipment, so they can be any sedan so long as they pass our inspection process, but they are majority engaged in non-emergency transportation for ambulatory patients. This is an important type of transportation because the majority of the reimbursement for the non-emergency medical vehicles is now provided by Medi-Cal and private health plans, meaning that more and more patients or people who rely on transportation to go to the doctor utilize these type of vehicles. Concerns are similar to the ones that we have with taxi cabs due to the high insurance premiums and recent competitions with TNCs that are incursioning in the non-emergency medical transportation market. Low-speed vehicles, you've probably seen most of them operating in our downtown area. They are electric, and the fares are established by a zone rate or by a prearranged contract. They currently operate in the city of San Diego. There are future plans for the city of National City to implement low-speed vehicles in National City. They are an important type of transportation because they're popular for short trips, mainly within the downtown areas of the cities. However, there are concerns because there was a drop of tourism and entertainment events in downtown due to the recent pandemic. In jitneys, they're mostly seen in our Otay and San Isidro border area. They charge a flat rate, and they are important because they supplement our fixed route service. So they allow passengers who need to go certain places where a fixed route service might not be able to take them, and they provide that additional service. The concerns are that there is a drop in border area business due once again to the pandemic and continuing high insurance premiums. This chart shows the permitted vehicles as of January 12 of 2013. In a total of permitted vehicles of 1,317, the majority of which are taxi cabs. There is a difference between the total number of permits and the permits in operation. And the difference between those is that several permit holders, for various reasons, decide to place their vehicles under surrendered or out of service because they do not want to pay the insurance premiums. They're traveling abroad, or for many other reasons, they're not ready to come back into business. But whenever they do choose to come back, it's a simple process, and we're able to put them back into service as soon as they provide us with the necessary requirements. This chart shows the total taxi cab permits over time. And as you can see, since 2016, there was a constant decline in the number of taxi cabs servicing City of San Diego and the other additional cities. The main reason for the decline was the increased participation of TNCs, or I should say the loss of market share to TNCs, which was exacerbated in 2020 and 2021 due to the COVID pandemic. But as you can see, as of last year, we start to see an increase for the first time in those years. We're really excited to see that. And there are various factors behind that increase, and we expect that trend to continue. As far as the total non-taxi permits over time, there is a slight difference. These numbers remain more constant because the non-emergency medical and LSV numbers were not affected as much as TNCs or the COVID pandemic. So that's why you see a little bit more of a stable numbers throughout the years for non-emergency type of permits. As far as our efforts to assist the for-hire vehicle industry, we recently completing the following actions. We reduced our administration operating costs. We moved our administrative offices. We adjusted our staffing and outsourced required annual vehicle inspections to any mechanic shop that's approved by the California Bureau of Automotive Repair. By doing that, that allowed it. We used to do inspections in-house. However, by taking this action, which happens to be an industry standard in the state of California, it resulted in staffing and overhead costs. Through those reduced operating costs, we were able to stabilize the annual regulatory fee to the lowest amount since 2014. And that is very important for the industry, as they have expressed that this allows them to plan ahead for future operating costs and contributes to the permit renewal for every year. We have also worked with the City of San Diego to remove regulatory requirements on taxi cabs under policy 500-02. An example of those is to remove vehicle H limits, and so long as those vehicles pass our rigorous safety inspection requirements. We've also worked with the city to reduce the maximum liability insurance for taxi cabs from $1 million to $350,000 combined single limit, with the intent of lowering insurance premiums for those permit holders. And recently, taxi cabs are also now an MTS access paratransit provider for ambulatory patients, and that has increased the business for our taxi cabs by partnering with MTS for those paratransit trips. Ongoing efforts include reduction of regulatory requirements, so long as MTS public safety and fair consumer practices goals are being met. We aim for consistency with regulatory requirements enforced by other for-hire vehicle regulatory agencies, not only in the state of California, but across the country. We work with the industry through the Taxi Cab Advisory Committee and the Non-Emergency Medical Ad Hoc Working Group. And whenever possible, we focus on educating permit holders about safety and other permit requirements instead of penalizing them for violations. And to finalize, due to various factors in the for-hire vehicle transportation market, we expect the number of permitted vehicles to increase, especially for taxi cabs and non-emergency medical transportation. Expanding transportation options for residents and visitors of San Diego, as well as non-emergency medical patients. This concludes my presentation. If there's any questions, my contact information is there. Members of the public can contact us at any time, and I'm open for any questions if there are any. Thank you.
Sure. Let me see if we have any public speakers.
We do. Karina Contreras, please unmute yourself now.
Thank you all. This is Karina Contreras, Transportation Policy Advocate for Climate Action Campaign. And I just want to highlight one thing, which is the low-speed vehicles. This type of vehicle is something that we continue to see more proliferation throughout the region. And it is critical that we have the type of infrastructure for a low-speed vehicle, which currently the state of California allows a low-speed vehicle in streets posted 35 miles per hour or less. Not only is 35 miles per hour or less safer, but we can expand connectivity throughout San Diego by ensuring that local jurisdictions such as the city of San Diego are really planning for low-speed vehicles in the future by taking a look at the speeds of streets, especially those that are connecting different resources to different populations. So I just wanted to highlight that. Thank you.
That concludes public comment, Chair.
Thank you. We'll go to Member Eloy Rivera.
Thank you, Chair. Lenny, thank you so much for the report. I've had the privilege of chairing the Taxi Advisory Committee the last couple of years, and I'm really looking forward to another year in doing so. I've had an opportunity to sit alongside the folks who are the backbone of that industry, make up a really important part of our transportation network. These are really hardworking people who have been through a lot the last decade or so, as Uber and Lyft and folks who weren't even required to make a profit and could undercut them in terms of prices, really made it hard for them to get by. And they stuck through it and are very committed to providing a high level of service to the community. And so I really just want to express appreciation, Lenny, to you and Samantha for all the work that you've done to streamline the regulatory process that makes them more competitive with the hedge funded technology that they're competing against. And as a result, that means folks here in San Diego have a better chance to make ends meet, to stay here, to keep roofs over their families' heads. And I think that's really, really important. I want to echo what we heard from Ms. Contreras in terms of the opportunities with low-speed vehicles. And I look forward to working with that committee to explore ways to provide additional opportunities for folks who are in the taxi industry to branch into that type of driving, because I think it's going to be a really important part of our transportation network moving forward. And the last thing I just wanted to say is, for the members of the board, any ideas you all have for conversations that we should bring back to the industry, the Taxi Advisory Committee is a great place for that. We are trying to do have more conversations about thinking forward, and would welcome your ideas. So don't hesitate to reach out to me, to Julio on my team, or obviously Lenny is a great point of contact as well.
Thank you,
Chair.
Thank you. Thank you. Seeing no other comments, thank you for the presentation and the work. We will move on to item 20, our operational budget status report. And we will turn it over to Gordon for presentation.
Good morning. My name is Gordon Meyer. I'm the operating budget supervisor here at MTS. This morning, I'm going to provide an update on the FY23 operating budget results through November 2022, or the first 5 months of our fiscal year. So jumping into the numbers, so first we'll look at our operating revenues, and on the first line we have fare revenue, and we've been tracking nicely to budget here through November. We were 142,000 favorable to budget, or 0.5%. Fare revenue was favorable to last year by 9.1 million, or 47.6%. Part of that is because we had a free ride month last year, so some of it is actual ridership gains, and then part of it is just that we didn't have a free ride month this year. And then some positive signs: passenger revenue was at 71.3% of our pre-COVID baseline in November, so we continue to slowly see growth in that area as well. Next line, we have our other operating revenue. So here we were favorable by 488,000, or 5.4%. So the favorable number is really due to a good November for vehicle advertising revenue, which is our bus and trolley wrap revenue. So we get one annual check for how much we exceed our minimum advertising guarantee, and so we received a figure that was about $1.5 million higher than what we had budgeted. And that was really due to Comic-Con coming back full strength. So that really propped this number up through November. Offsetting that is unfavorable state energy credit revenue, specifically the low LCFS revenue due to a falling credit price. So we had budgeted $140 per credit going into this year, which was already quite a bit off of our average highs over the last few years. And we've been trading recently around $70 per credit, so almost half of what we had budgeted. So that's a figure we will be adjusting downward fairly significantly in the upcoming budget amendment. So all in all, our operating revenues are favorable by 631,000, or 1.7% through November. Moving on to expenses, so personnel costs were unfavorable by 1.3 million, or 1.9%. That's being driven by unfavorable workers' compensation costs within both our bus and rail divisions. And then we also are experiencing higher operator wages due to an unplanned CBA increase that we did to try to address the driver shortage. Next line, we have our purchase transportation. So that is our first transit and our Transdev contracts. So here we're favorable by $3.5 million through November, or about 9%. On the fixed route side, which is Transdev, we are having savings because we haven't been able to operate our full service levels because of the driver shortage. And then on the paratransit side, which is First Transit, we haven't seen demand pick up as fast as we had initially planned in the budget. Next line, we have other outside services. So here we were favorable by 1.3 million, or 8.8% through the first 5 months. A big part of that is Pronto operating and maintenance costs. So we did not start incurring those operating costs until we provided final acceptance of the software. We had planned on doing that in July at the very start of the fiscal year from a budget perspective, but we actually didn't end up providing final acceptance until I think last month. So we had about a half year's savings of operating costs due to delaying that acceptance. We also had some smaller savings in the engines and transmission overhauls on the bus side, and then some favorable figures in the trolley repair and maintenance costs as well. Energy, we're unfavorable by 1.1 million or 5.9% through November. That's almost entirely on the compressed natural gas side right now. The commodity rates have been through the roof, and they've only been getting worse since November. So the high commodity rates for CNG also impact our electricity rates. So we have some pretty unfavorable experience going on there. And that's another big item we'll be adjusting during the upcoming budget amendment as well. And then lastly, we have other expenses. That includes our risk management costs as well as our general and administrative costs. And we're about 91,000 unfavorable or 0.7% to date. So all in all, our operating expenses are favorable by just under 2.4 million or 1.6%. So when we look at those combined, we had through November a favorable net operating income of just over $3 million or 2.6%. Looking forward, we expect the purchase transportation costs to continue to be favorable until we do the budget amendment. Energy, we expect to continue to be pretty bad. And then the energy credit revenue, will be adjusting that downward as well. And those are really the three big ones that we'll be bringing back. And then just a short update on our stimulus funds. So as Karen had mentioned in her presentation, we are projecting about a $37 million stimulus or a structural deficit in our budget, which we included stimulus funds to cover. Overall, we have 360 million in stimulus funds since we received all of them, and we've spent about 160.1 million of that to date. That leaves us with about 200 million left for addressing the structural deficits in the operating budget. So any favorable budget results this year will mean that we can make those stimulus funds last longer. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Do we have any public speakers?
We do not, Chair.
Comments, questions? Member Montgomery Step.
Thank you so much. I just have one question about the stimulus funds. Is there a date where we have to spend those down, or are they?
So we don't have, for the CARES, which was the first bucket of 220 million, there is no timeline on that. For the ARP funds, there is an obligation date. I think it was 2026, which means that we're not at risk of not being able to spend any of that, but we have prioritized spending the ARP funds first in order to have that not even be a concern. So,
Okay,
yeah.
thank you so much.
Member McCann.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your presentation. I'm going to be looking forward to working with you on these items. To add to Councilmember Montgomery's question on the stimulus funds, obviously we need to make sure that we have a firm financial foundation. Those funds, as we know, in the future may be cut or not appropriated properly. What is our plan to make sure that we are financially stable, especially with a structural deficit, if for some reason the stimulus funds are decreased or taken aback?
I can answer that, Gordon. So we've already been looking at this. We're very concerned that there's going to be a deal cut where they're going to say, okay, well, whatever's not been spent, let's just claw that back. And then, but we've obligated all of the CARES Act funds. And that's typically the point when they can't claw it back. That, in other words, that's our funds. We obligated it, but we haven't spent it. But then the ARP stuff is what we have to work on. And so we were going to potentially bring some scenarios to the Budget Development Committee to discuss, should we maybe be putting and with the federal government, you spend it first and then you get reimbursed for it. Should we spend it and then keep our TDA or our Transnet funds or our fare revenue in a separate reserve where we can get interest payments? These are all kind of scenarios we want to tease out for the Budget Development Committee and ultimately the board.
Yeah, and I appreciate your comments on that because I think we need to be able to have a strategy. If for some reason there is some deal in Washington that may decrease the stimulus funding, because that substantially could affect us. And we want to make sure that we continue to provide good transportation system without some big financial blip in the road. So I really appreciate your efforts on that. And I think some of those ideas that you're bringing up are some things that we should consider to make sure that we're financially stable for the future. The other thing is, I know we have a free rider month, and I know one of the challenges we also have is the fare evaders and the tapping issues. Is there a way where maybe we could use that month of free ridership to become an education opportunity where we could market on how, hey, you guys are riding it now. It's free right now, but in the way we want you to do this in the future is this is how you tap and make it as a marketing opportunity. So we could not only get additional ridership, but make sure that when they do ride in the future on the non-free months, that they would properly tap and pay for the service.
I guess I'll just jump in to clarify. We did a free ride month in September of 2021 because and we paired it with the transfer over from our Compass card fare system to the Pronto system. So during the month of September 2021, we basically incentivized if you downloaded a Pronto account, then you would be free for that month. And so that was the way to transfer people over. So right now, I don't think that the budget includes another free ride month, for future years.
Okay.
Yeah, that's great. We do not have another free ride month. We do usually include a free ride day, which we did this year as well. But last year was special, like Karen said, because of the Pronto cutover.
And that's understandable. But even if we do a free ride day, maybe it could be a media opportunity where we could talk about it, but that would lead into making sure that we educate on the tap and say, hey, this is a great opportunity for you to ride free. And in the future, here's how you need to do to make sure you're appropriately paying for it so we can increase the revenue for people riding. Because I do believe there's a fair share of people that either are in a hurry or they don't fully understand. And in today's world, we're constantly doing the TikTok thing where it's like, I'm going to pay attention for 30 seconds. And if I don't understand it, I'm gone. And we want to make sure that we have an ability so people will be able to understand how to properly tap and pay so we can increase revenue for the system. The last thing on revenue, one of the great things we have is Comic-Con coming back. As you know, the #1 tourist attraction that brings people into San Diego is Comic-Con. And so I just want to make sure that when we are looking at doing the wrap advertising and that we are working with somebody to make sure that we are maximizing the revenue. Those advertising opportunities, I think, are very, very valuable, especially for many of the movies and themes like that. So I just want to make sure that we are receiving a good payment in doing that so we can maximize the revenue from the advertising.
Yeah, just one comment on that. So we're under contract with, I think it's Clear Channel, to manage our vehicle advertising, and we've seen that number steadily increase over the years. I think that I said it, we beat our budget by about $1.5 million. I think the total was about $3.5 million. So it is becoming a pretty significant revenue source for us. That's just the vehicle piece. We have other areas as well that we advertise for.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Member Bush.
There we go. And appreciate the Mayor McCann for bringing up those issues. On getting back to his point about passenger revenue, so the variance, so we have a positive variance. We took in more revenue than the actuals are better for the passenger revenue, which is the fare box recovery, right?
Yeah, I mean, we had higher ridership and higher, higher fare revenue than we budgeted. It's very close, but yes.
I see it's close, but it is positive. So I think that getting back to our earlier, discussion on fare evasion, it's not crisis to the point where it's impacting, it's really hurting us. So I just want to point that out on here because we do have a positive variance, but what was the percent? What would that variance have been? Did staff estimate with the fare evasion, how that ties into the budget and what's being collected?
Well, it would, and of course, this is just a snapshot through November. So this isn't the full year. But as Karen said, it's estimated that we're losing out on about $9 million, $8.5–9 million. So when you say it's not a crisis mode, correct, in that we have stimulus money to backfill and keep us from hitting the fiscal cliff. But every time we lose an opportunity to capture, why we're ahead of budget is because we have gone far and above what we thought we'd get our ridership back. And I attribute that to our wonderful marketing and communications department. And our wonderful operators who provide excellent service. But I do believe, we were too conservative in our assumptions as to how fast people would come back to transit. So, but what we're losing is that as they're coming back, we're not getting the commensurate amount of fare revenue that we should be.
Got it. So then staff estimated that it's 8 to 10 million was what the estimated loss from that leakage.
Yes.
So what was quick math? What would that variance? So then what would you project that variance would have been the actual then? Because we would have exceeded our budget. Our budget was adopted already, but then what do you all project the actual would have been on fare revenue?
Well, and again, that 8 to 9 million is an estimate for an annual figure. And then we've also seen that loss moving up. In other words, the amount is increasing over time.
Oh, so future
it's not like you can take $9 million divided by 12 and figure out the months. It's not that clean.
Got it. Okay, so I'm just trying to understand what the relationship with the actual impact of that and Pronto and some of the issues there with the actual. So that's why I'm asking.
Yeah.
Just trying to determine that.
So just to add one thing on that. So our budget figures did include the projected impact of the lack of tapping. Like we saw a significant reduction in the average fare on the trolley, and we include that in our budget projection. So this budget projection includes the impact of the lack of tapping. So, yeah.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Thank you for the presentation. I have no updated in chair's report. I'm going to have Sharon, if you have anything in CEO's report.
I do. We have an excellent promotional thing that we do every year, which is our laptop scholarship program, where we ask high school students to write an essay, and then we have volunteer staff members who read the essays and score them. And then we give 40 high school students a laptop, and it's throughout our entire jurisdiction. We do this with the County Office of Education. And today is the event, and at your seats, you should have the details about that if you wanted to listen in. We actually videotape some people who are getting the news that they won the scholarship. It's fun. So if you have a minute, if you want to have it on in the background, or if you can pay attention and dial in, please do. And then in front of you as well is a list of APTA conferences this year. The American Public Transportation Association is in person, fully in person with their conferences. We, as an agency, have always enjoyed the ability to bring board members so that they can learn more about the industry from our peers in North America. And so we wanted to see if you had any interest. By checking the box, you don't have to let us know now that you want to do it. It just puts it on our radar And then the clerk of the board would contact you to see if you wanted to put that in there. So if you want to fill them out and then bring them back at the next board meeting, that would be fine. Or if you want to just send over your interest to Dahlia, that would be great too.
All right. Any board member communications or updates? Yeah, Mr. McCann.
Thank you. I just wanted to thank, I'm very honored to become a member of this board. There are many people that I know and respect. Obviously, Nathan Fletcher, I've known you since the early 2000s, and I'm really looking forward to working with you. And anybody that I haven't met, I look forward to working with you collaboratively. Obviously, Chula Vista has the blue line going through it and is a substantial ridership that we share. And just want to make sure that we are going to help focus on that, improve the system, make sure that we provide the best transit services we can. Thank you.
Thank you, and we welcome you to the board. Your predecessor was an active and engaged member for many years, Mayor Salas, and we look forward to continuing to work with Chula Vista. We have a few public speakers remaining, so at this point, let's resume our non-agendized public communication. And then hold on, don't leave, because after we're done, we gotta take our picture.
John Wood, can you please make your way to the podium?
John Elwood, I'm from Lemon Grove. A while back, you guys changed out some of the shelters. And I live a mile away from the first bus stop in Lemon Grove. It's down on Massachusetts and Broadway, or Federal, whichever it is. And at the trolley depot, there used to be two shelters on both sides of Broadway. Now there's only one on each side of Broadway. And to me, that's totally insane because that depot is busy all the time. So you need places for people getting off the buses on one side of Broadway and bus shelters on the other side of Broadway for the people getting off the trolley or going to the trolley, whichever. The bench, the trolleys or the bus stop at Massachusetts or College and Broadway is just a bench. And when you're my age, it's not a lot of fun sitting in the sun waiting for a bus or sitting on the bench in the rain. It's not a lot of fun. Maybe everybody else thinks it's fun, but it's not. You've got up in College Grove, you've got a bunch of shelters, but two of them have been shut down. You could move those down to Lemon Grove.
30 seconds left.
Pardon me?
You have 30 seconds to conclude your comment.
I would like to see the benches turned into shelters. It's a mess. I brought it up to city council. They don't know anything about it. The one shelter.
Your time has expired.
Go ahead and finish your thoughts, sorry.
At the trolley stop you can't see the buses coming down Broadway.
Yeah.
Because there's trash cans on that end. And, you know, when you're sitting there, you're waiting for the bus, you don't want to get up,
Yes.
at least I don't want to get up and sit back down, get up, sit back down.
Understood. Thank
Yeah.
you, sir. Thank you. We'll definitely look into what we can do in that area. Thank you for coming down today.
Matthew Kostrinsky, please make your way to the podium.
Good morning, almost good afternoon. My name's Matt Kostrinsky. I'm coming here representing myself. Normally I do these speeches for something else, but I'm here for myself. November 11th, 2017, now about 5.5 years ago, my son had a 9th birthday party. It was an accident and changed my family's life. A collapse of a second floor observation structure within an MTS building. Just last week, while I was in New York, I was on a second floor in a theater. I had a little PTSD because it reminds me every time I get on these structures that I don't feel safe. My two sons had that same anxiety that we have because of that. My mom, who's now walker bound with permanent spinal problems, tries to move along. Over the last 5.5 years, we've tried to reach an agreement, and finally, June 24th of last year, we reached an agreement with MTS for this. However, now it's 7 months as of 2 days ago since we reached that agreement, and we have not been able to finalize the settlement with MTS, our lawyers say. I'm asking, personally, this is about me and my family. I'm looking for help to finally settle this issue, because every day it hangs over my family's head. We're reminded every time we talk to our attorneys, every time we talk to someone, they say, how's it going, and so forth. I want this over with, to be honest. It's not a lot of money that we're looking for, that we're getting. I'm not asking to get involved in the settlement. I just want it done. I want to end this tragedy that happened 5.5 years ago for my son's 9th birthday party, who's now 14.5 years old. So I ask you as a board to help me and my family end this. So thank you.
That concludes public comment, Chair.
Thank you. Our next meeting date is February 16th, 2023 at 9 a.m. And with that, we stand adjourned. Let me ask all the board members to come into the center area here. We'll take a photo and then you're free to go.